Okay, thank you very much for coming. This talk is entitled Visualizing Financial Data Using Power BI and R. And I want to explain to you that Power BI and R go together like strawberries and cream. They are a really good combination, a marriage made in heaven, and not just a kind of product made by Microsoft. And what I'd like to do is to show rather than tell. And I'm going to talk about 5 examples. One didn't make the director's cut. And the common theme about all these examples is that they are grounded in projects that I've done over the last few years. You'll probably notice that there's a kind of financial theme going through it, and that's because of the kind of area I've worked in. So let's start from top left. And the first one is going to be a market risk backtest. I'll explain that why we can build this, why this visual is important, and why we can build this visual in using a standard visual in Power BI, why it might be better to build it as an R visual, and I'll show how to do that. The second one is my main example. It's going to be all about text analytics. And what we're going to do, first of all, I'll show you some text analytics in R. And what I wanted you to show there is why use R at all? Why not use Power BI? I want to show some of the power and some of the sophistication of R, how we can cover a lot of ground in R, a lot of analytical ground in R with only a short amount of time, a short amount of code. We'll take that R and we'll embed it within Power BI reports, and we'll make it even better, and we'll show how they combine. The third example is actually one that didn't make the director's cut, because it's basically to do with Power BI and the power of the data model. It's not necessarily about R in particular. It was about the data about the European Bank Authority and its stress test results, some financial stress test results. But what I'll do is I'll put a blog post about that in a few days, and if anybody really got an interest in these stress results, come and talk to me and any time during the next couple of days, and I'll gladly kind of spend a lot of time demoing it to them. The fourth one is a visual which is with built-in R, which makes a really good visual. It's an overview of a very large, multi-year, multi-million project for project managers, and we'll explain why it makes why an R visual is such a good fit for it. The fifth one is actually a counter-example. This is something called Operational Risk and Controls Assessment. It's a standard report for operational risk within banking. And we'll show that while you can do it in Power BI with a standard visual, and you can do it with an R, the best way is to do it with Power BI and Excel together, and I'll explain why. Finally, we'll look at a famous visual that many of you will know. It's Hans Rosling's 200 Countries in 200 Years, showing the history of countries' health and wealth over the last 200 years. And that will show how we can easily build the visual in Power BI, but the problem there is getting the data into the right shape. So what we'll do there is we'll show the data preparation tool, and we'll show both in Query Editor and in Power BI, and we'll show the power of those. So let me just go to the next slide. Well, who am I? Well, I'm an independent consultant from London. 2 things might be of interest to you. If you live or work or pass through London, then the screen on the right, I run a popular data analytics community group. It's called a London Business Analytics Group. We have meetings about once a month. We have about 100 to 200 people come to the meetings. We have talks about anything and everything to do with data analytics. It's free to come to it. And our next talk is actually on June the 21st. It's a lady from the British Museum, and she's talking about managing data teams, managing data science teams. If you're not in London, and as most of you are not, then you might be interested in the slide on the left, because we record some of our talks, and we put them up, and they're put up on a particular website. I'll give you the links to that at the end of it. And in a couple of weeks, while you're waiting for all the Data Insight talks to appear, then you maybe want to watch some of these. What I'll say, at the end of the talk, I'll give links to these. I'll also give links to all the Power BI desktop files and all the R code that I will show as well. Okay, the first one we want to talk about is something called the market risk backtest. If I press 6, I hope that you will see yes. So this is a chart built with the Power BI visual. I'm showing it in the Power BI service here. And what it is a very important chart in market risk. It shows the P&L of a particular book, in this case, the Convertibles Europe manufacturing book, for the last 2 years. We've got a data axis on there looking at the last 2 years. Each of those bars is the P&L for a particular day. Obviously, we like to make money. Hopefully, there's more bars going above zero than they are going below zero. So on the whole, the book makes money. Those black lines are called the VAR envelope. That's the margin of safety. Now, the financial regulators make us produce this report. It's a report to make sure that we keep our risk under control. Because what we do is we promise the financial regulators that we won't have any of the breaches. That's when the P&L breaks that VAR envelope, those red lines, more than 1 time in 100. So it's okay to have breaches 2 or 3 times a year. There's 250 business days in a year. But if we start having 5 or 6 or 7, then we have to have a lot more regulatory capital, and bad things start to happen about that. So this is a very important chart. We produce lots of them every day, and you see that we've got one here. And what I'll show you if I go into the Power BI desktop in a minute is that we can build this chart really well with the standard Power BI visual. But that's not good enough for the regulators, or at least it's not good enough for the business analysts who kind of interpret the edicts of the regulators. And they want something, and they demand something like this. Now, there's only one small change to this report, and that is those 2 black lines. Instead of those 2 black lines for the VAR envelope, what we've got is we've got this grey, semi-transparent area. Not much, I think. I actually prefer the standard one. But we can't actually produce that in Power BI. Let me just come out of that and go to my Power BI desktop. And if I bring it up, I'll give this backtest. So what can we do there? That's our standard backtest in the Power BI desktop, and that's our backtest. And what I've done here is I've created something called an R visual. So if I click on this, you can see that there's an R visual. And if I bring that up there, what it allows us to do, it provides us a data frame, which is a combination of these 5 values in the values field. So it gives R a data set. And then what I do with that, I've got that data set, and really what I'm doing is I'm doing a call to an R plotting package called ggplot that allows me to precisely plot what I want exactly where I want. So here I am saying, take a ggplot, copy the bars, show me the bars, show me the area, and this time I'm making it green, and this alpha says I'm making it translucent. Then it says a bit more information about exactly how I want the X and Y axes to look. So here's an example of using an R visual, which is when you've got a user who demands an exact visual type, and the Power BI standard visuals, or these HTML visuals or the custom visuals can't yet create it. So that's our first demo. Let me just go back to the slides. Okay. And what I've got is basically my emergency slides there. So let's go over there. There we see our script editor. Okay. What I want to do is to talk about a new project that I've been involved in. In the last project was very familiar to me. I've spent more years than I care to remember building data which is very quantitative data, P&L, credit risk, VAR, which is aggregated up hierarchies by geography, by product, and so on. But the new kid on the block is text analytics, and there's more and more focus on the analysis of text. We've just heard in Christian and Justina's talk about some very sophisticated text analytics. There's more and more documents, financial documents, and this is becoming very important. So I want to take you through a text analytics project. And the purpose of this project is to show why I like R and why I think that R is a really good fit. And so what we're going to do is we're going to analyze some financial documents. And it's these documents here. This is the last 7 years of the corporate responsibility report for a large bank. The corporate responsibility report is a kind of companion document to the annual report. And it talks about what the firm is doing in its responsibilities to its wider stakeholders, its employees, as well as that to the climate and any kind of philanthropic efforts that they're doing as well. And what's inside one of the reports? Well, it's a 60-page PDF, and it talks about, here are 3 example pages: responsibility for the environment, employer, and society. What I'd like to do is to analyze that data and see if there are any trends through the years. Are there any words? Let's take the rather tenuous idea that a word that becomes more popular through the years is going to be somehow more important to the bank. So let's see if we can define any trends. And I also might want to put my own agenda on it. So for example, if I'm interested in corporate governance, then I might be particularly interested in the words in the conduct column there. If I'm a climate change activist, then they're the words in that climate column. Now, normal sentiment analysis doesn't really work for business speak. It's too couched, it's too euphemistic. You're not going to get happiness and sadness as you are in social networking. So we can do this hot topics as well, and we'll take a look at that. So let's get started with the demo. And what I want to do, first of all, is show you some R code. Oh, and very quickly, just to show you, here's a report. It's public data. It's on the internet. And if you're very good at speed reading, there you are. You can read the document. But we're not going to do it like this. We're going to do it in R. And what I've got here is I've got some R Markdown. I've built my R in R Studio, as Layla did. Thank you very much. So let me press. Let me just say thank you very much for that. Good, thanks. Okay. So I've got some R Markdown here. I built some R in R Studio, and what you see, the actual R code is in this gray area here, but I've used some R Markdown, which means I can put some commentary around it, and I can show some of the results, and I can put some visuals. So the first good thing about R is it has these wonderful packages, and there's a wonderful package to take PDF and take the PDFs and pass that into text. And then there's another wonderful package, a text analysis package, that we're going to use to analyze that. So we're going to use both of those. We're going to load up those PDFs, and we're going to get our first result of raw data, and it's this, basically. It tells me I've got a row here for every word. Now, what I've done, first of all, I've got rid of those boring stop words that Justina and Christian talked about, all those ands and thats and it. So I've got rid of all those in my text analysis. And so I've got the interesting words. And so it tells me that on page 1 of the 2016 report, corporate appears. And it also appears 3 times in page 2. There's 3 rows for that, and page 3, and so on. And in all, I've got 119,000 words in the 7 documents. And so what we can do again with R is we can very quickly aggregate and summarize that data, and we can come to our top 20 list. And again, we see what we call in the UK, having been through an election, a political slogan. These are strong and stable words. And you might imagine employees there at the top, financial responsibility, well, it's in the title. Sustainability makes the top 20, but only just. So what we can do is, again, we can use a plotting package, again, that ggplot package that I showed you with the backtest. And here I'm doing a very simple ggplot package to give me a bar chart, and I'm just plotting all these strong and stable words. So far, not very interesting. But let's have a look about how take those 20 words and see how they change over time. And again, I can do a bit of manipulation of the data, and I can do and I can plot a ggplot. And now we're seeing something which is a bit more interesting. We're looking at these words, and maybe if I can make that a bit bigger, lovely. We're looking at these words, and we can see, for example, employees, although it's the most popular word, it seems to be decreasing in popularity from 2011 downwards. What we're seeing is a row for every year from 2011 to 2016. And energy was the kind of word of the year, the mot du jour, on 2011, 2012, but it has seen a decline as well. So maybe there's some trends there we can get and look at. Now, that was a bit of a dodgy analysis that we just did, because each of those documents, a simple word count, doesn't give us accurate answers, because each of those documents is a slightly different length. So let's do a bit more of an interesting analysis. Let's work out all the frequencies, and what we can do is then we can produce a plot like this. And what we're doing here is we're plotting the 2016 frequencies on the y-axis against each chart represents a previous year. So, for example, in 2010, here in this top left corner where the cursor is, we see these were words that would be popular in 2016 but not in 2010, and vice versa. Now, these are 5,000 words points there and a postage stamp. Let me sort out that problem for you later on. But put that to one side. Let's take it a bit further, and let's say, okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to look at our hot words. And so what we're doing now is exactly the same, but we're showing 2016 again, this time against 2010, 2012, and 2014. But what we're showing is we're showing each dot for each word, but we're just labeling the hot words, and then we're categorizing each category has a different color. So we can see, for example, if we hear that this leftmost one, we're looking at, for example, carbon was a popular word in 2010, but not so popular in 2016. Whereas in 2016, ethics is predominating. It comes as a popular word in 2016 against 2010, 2012, and 2014. Again, starts us to give some ideas about questions we can ask of the data. Now, the problem with that particular one is that we have all these words up here, like environment and employee, that we see across every single report. So we can do a text analysis, text mining algorithm that de-emphasizes those words and emphasizes those words that only appear in one or two reports, if only a single report. It's called TF-IDF analysis. And then we start seeing some words, again, we can do the same thing, and we start seeing some words, one for each year here. And this is starting to give us some interesting results. If I look at 2016, the top word is referendum. Some small, unimportant country had a referendum about European Union membership. I don't know much about it. In 2010, it was much more important. We were talking about plastic bags. You can see 2010, number 2 and number 3 are plastic bags. Kuaba, by the way, is some sort of a particular brand name for a particular personal bank account. That might hint somewhere that the single word analysis is not yet enough, and we ought to start doing some analysis of double or triple words or sentence or topic modeling. Anyway, we can see in 2015 the most common word was SDGs. SDGs? That's not a word. What it is an acronym. It stands for Sustainable Development Goals, United Nations Goals. And what I've done in this text mining is I've lowercased everything, and I can't differentiate between acronyms. So let's focus in on those acronyms, and what I want to do is I'll define an acronym as something that has 2 or more consecutive capital letters. Again, do a bit of text analytics, and we're coming up, and then we'll plot it with an R-word cloud, and we're coming up with something that looks like you go to the opticians and you test your eyes. How many of these 349 words could you know? Even I can do some of the big ones, UN, US, UK, EMEA, obviously, and so on. But there are quite a lot of buzzwords in these reports. And again, we can look at them also, these acronyms or these buzzwords by year. What I want to take you out of that is in a short time, with a small amount of code, and quite straightforward code, we've covered a lot of ground. We've done a lot of analysis. We've parsed the text. We've got the text out of a PDF. We've done some basic text analysis and some not so basic text analysis. Nothing quite as grand as the LDA algorithm that the previous speakers were talking about, but still meaningful all the same. We've aggregated that data, looked at top 10s, and then we've visualized it. So we've got all these lovely visuals. The problem with them is at the moment is that they're static and we can't distribute them. So let's have a look and go and have a look at Power BI to do that. So what we can do is we can go into Power BI. Lovely. Okay, and here is a Power BI standard visual. It shows the frequency of 2050 words in 2015 against 2016, and I like it. It's better than the visuals I've just shown you because, of course, we can filter. We can now make it interactive. We can filter if we wanted to, and we've got tooltips, and that's very useful when you see you've got so many words like all of these, so you can home in on a particular word. And however I created this, well, it's a standard visual, but if I look and if I go to Edit Queries, and if I have a look at these queries, some of you might notice that the eagle-eyed ones amongst you might notice that these are the same names as the data frames in R, and that's because if I go to the source, what I'm doing is I'm taking that R code that I just showed you in the R Markdown, and I've made it as a source to the Power BI query. So by doing that, what I can do is I can get my wonderful benefits of all my text analytics, all my PDF parsing, and so on, and make it available, all that good analytics. So I'm analyzing in R, and I'm visualizing in Power BI. Of course, I can just take I can take my R visuals, and Layla showed exactly this earlier on, and I showed it earlier on. So we're taking our R visuals, and we're doing exactly the same. We're creating doing a ggplot, exactly the same code that you just saw in the R Markdown, and we're just applying that. But now we've got our R visual, and what we can do is we can now start filtering on it and making that static R visual interactive. And obviously we can put it into, if I go into the Power BI, if I go into demos, and if I have a look at my reports, and we can publish them to the Power BI service. And here is, for example, our visual, nicely interactive. So let's go back to the slides. If I press the button. So what we've shown we've shown doing our Markdown, doing our development, our analysis in R. That's our Markdown. I'll quickly go to that. We've shown a standard report. We've shown that we're using the source data. We're using the R script as a source. And then we're be able to produce these beautiful charts in Power BI. There we go. And we have a look, yes. And the one thing I forgot to mention as well, if I come over here, if I just flick back to 6, one of the things that we did with our acronyms was that we produced an R word cloud. But Kim this morning in the keynote showed a custom visual, which is this custom visual, which is the custom word cloud, custom visual word cloud, which is much better. And so I'm taking that, I'm just taking my R source, and I'm just using that as the source for this custom word cloud, which I think looks much better than the word cloud that I could have done in R. Okay. Right. So we're going to pass over this stress test results. As I say, what we were going to show there is the power of the model. But as I say, I will write a blog post about that, and we will, if anybody wants to talk to me about it, we can talk about that later on. But I want to pass over to one which is, let me just go to my data insights, reports. Give it a second. Lovely. Okay. And this is another reason for producing on our visual. It's a very recent project that we've had. And what the project managers wanted to do, this is an overview of a very large project. It's a multi-year project. On the x-axis, we have from 2015 all the way through 2018. It's a 3-year project. It's a financial project. It's something called BCBS 239, which is a set of regulations in finance all about risk and data aggregation and reporting. And all banks have to make sure that all their reports are clear, concise, transparent, and so on. And that's produced an awful lot of work. In fact, we've got 2,000 milestones on this. And what the project managers wanted to see was they wanted to see the wood for the trees. An ordinary Gantt chart wouldn't show it with its lines. But what we're showing here is all the milestones, and the milestones against each of the 11 principles that the BCBS regulations talk about. And we've used an R visual because an R visual has got 2 features that we've been able to do on this. The first is And the reason that we're using it is because we've got 2,000 points and we want to show them and show the structure. The first is that we've kind of jittered, or we've made each of these circles slightly up and down in the y-axis, so they're not all along the line, and so that we can see them a bit better, and that's called jitter. The other thing that we've done is that we've made these circles transparent, so partially transparent, so you can see where all the clusters are. Just to explain this a bit more, what we're seeing is that those milestones, the ones in blue are completed, the ones in red are not completed, and that dotted line in the middle is today, so they're overdue. You can see there's quite a few overdue. The ones in green are active, and we can see that there's even a few that have completed ahead of time. We can see that some people are not going to have a very nice Christmas, especially in data architecture, because there's a whole cluster of milestones with deadlines at the end of 2017, and that there are some principles that have hardly any work associated with them, frequency distribution, and some that are absolutely massive, like data architecture. So a way of viewing a large amount of data. And again, that's an R visual, and what I could say, as in this particular case, what we've done is we've done analyze in Power BI, there's no analysis in R, and visualize in R. Done that. Click that. Lovely. And again. Right. What I'd like to do is to talk about a counterexample here. And to do that, let me just bring up my report. This report is called a Risk and Controls Self-Assessment Report. It's a very standard report in operational risk. Operational risks are the risks such as BA had a couple of weeks ago when it grounded all its planes because of a power failure. There are risks of things going wrong, failures in systems or processes by accident or by design. And what we've got on the rows there are the 7 categories, is a kind of industry standard set of categories about operational risk. Internal fraud, external fraud. And then we've got some subcategories. Each of them has several subcategories. I've just put 2 or 3 here. On the columns, what we have is 3 families of columns. And the first column is the inherent risk score. What we do is we go through departments. I've just put 3 kind of regions here, Americas, Asia, and Europe. And we do an audit of the risks. And we come to a qualitative assessment of the risk. There's definitions behind them, which could be low, medium, high, or very high. And then we obviously, if we've got risks, we put controls in place to alleviate or to mitigate those risks. And those controls could be not controlled, adequate, inadequate, or vulnerable. We've got a 4-point scale for those risks. And as a result of applying those controls to those risks, we come up with the residual risk score. Hopefully, that's a lot more lows and mediums than before. And so here is an example of doing it, and this is using a standard visual. It's the new matrix visual, and it's very good because I can drill up and drill down quite nicely into it, and it shows the worst case scenario. Now, there's a small technical problem about this, which is that it's a heat map without any heat. What people want to see is they want to see colors. They want to see red, amber, green colors for high, medium, and low. And this, you have to work out, you can't see it at a glance. So, of course, you know what I'm going to say. We're going to look at my R visual. And here is my R visual. Now, close but no cigar. I mean, it's got the proper red, amber, green status, and we can see the colors, and that's better, but it's really quite ugly. And in this particular case, an R visual using ggplot, because we've got a couple of hierarchies on the rows and the columns, doesn't really hack it for a pixel-perfect report. It's good, but it's not very good. So what do we do in that case? If I come back to my demos, and if I'm going to workbooks, the answer in this case was to do it in Excel. And with Excel, we can, let me just bring that up, lovely, and let me just put that away. Great. So in this case, people want absolutely pixel-perfect reports. Everything has got to be absolutely precisely formatted and precisely done. We've got to have the legend exactly where it is. We've got to have exactly those colors. And I hope that you can see that at a glance, this is a much better report and much easier to read than the other two. So we can build it in Excel, and in this case, this is just a mock-up, but we could have had this Excel being fed by a cube, and using cube formulas in here to make this data live. So I'm not an R bigot. There are some cases when R and Power BI are not the best solution, and this is one of them. Good. Right. So we saw the heat map, we saw R, and finally we saw the Excel version. The last one I want to talk about is something that you'll all, or many of you will recognize. There's a TED Talk that's been seen 8 million times. It's by Hans Rosling, who sadly died last year. And it's a famous visualization about the health and wealth of the world. And let me just go to it and let me show you it implemented in Power BI. So give me 1 second, if I go to, let's have a look. So here's the visual, and what we're seeing is it's running through at a very fast rate between the year 1800 and 2010. What we're seeing is that each of those circles represents a country. The size of the circle represents the population of the country on that particular year. And on the x-axis, we have got wealth, or income, or GDP per capita. Notice that this is a log scale, and we're going from some $100 a year on one axis all the way to 100,000. So if I did it as a linear scale, it would be just too wide. So incredible increases in wealth, and also incredible increases in health. It's especially over the last 50 years, and we can look at a particular country and see how its particular story. And so if we go to Power BI Desktop, let me just go there. And the first thing is, here it is in Power BI Desktop, and it is in Power BI Desktop, it is really easy to build a visual. We start off with a scatter plot, and we have put country on our details that gives us the circles. We put x-axis on our income, and we say it's a log axis. Going back to this. We put life expectancy on our y-axis. We fix the axis from 20 years upwards. And population as our size. And we put play on our year. And it's almost a 5-minute job. So great that we can implement it in Power BI. The hard part of this comes from actually getting the data. Because what we need for that is we need a single data set, and that data set has got to have a row for every country, for every year from 1800, with life expectancy, population, and income. And we've got to have that, and we've got to build that data set. Now, Gapminder, Hans Rosling's foundation, also provide free data sets as well, public data sets of income, population, and life expectancy. And let's just go in and have a quick look at those. So I'm going to edit queries, and I'm going to have a look, yes. And here's the population data set. We've opened up the query editor. And first of all, you can see that they've got some problems here. We've got a few nulls, but also what we've got is we've got at least for the first 10 years, in the 19th century, we've got data every 10 years or so. Eventually it does come, so we get data every year. And it's also not in the right shape. We need it in a different shape. So we've got to we've got to sort out those problems. So we can do that, and this is a multi-step process. We can do that in Power BI. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create in Power BI Query a table that has, for every country, for every year, it has a row, because it's no good if we don't have a year, then our circles will disappear from time to time and then reappear. That would be very odd. And then what we've got to do is, if we go to population full here, for example, what we've got to do is we start off with our country year cross, our table with every row, and we're going to merge in our population. And there we are, we have it merged in, and we can see we've got a lot of null values in there. Now what we want to do is we want to fill down those values. So the value for 1800 fills 1801 to 1809, the value for 1810 fills 1811 to 1819, and so on. But to be able to do that, first, the next thing we've got to do is we've got to pivot our columns. So now we can do a fill down. And so here we've actually filled down our data set, and then we've got it in the right, we've tidied it up a bit. And then what we do is we come here, and what we do is start off with our source. We merge in our population, we merge in our income, our population, our life expectancy, add the region, and then we've got our final data set, exactly in the shape that we want it to do. But there, all the work and all the power has been in this kind of multi-step process of using Power Query. Let's go back, and then we've got that and we process it. But let me go back to this, because this is talk about R. And you might have noticed that there was, as well as population statistics, which was our final data set that we created with the query editor, there's one called population statistics R. And it's exactly the same data set, but it has been created, instead if I look at source, and if I come here, you see what I'm using some R code to do exactly the same. So now we've got ourselves a high quality problem in the sense that we can use R or we can use Power BI. If I want to look at the R data, here's the R data in R Markdown, and it's exactly the same logic I used in Power Query. So we're getting our data, where, in fact, in this case, I'm reading it from Excel, I'm having a look at some results, and then I'm pivoting, I'm filtering, I'm doing some calculations, and then, so it follows exactly the same thing. In the end, I have the same result. So the value there is in the data preparation, and we can use either Power Query or R to do that, so choose your poison. So there we are. Let's have a quick look. We've shown the demo of that with the missing data. There we go. And we're doing our pivots, both in R. So what I want to do is to give you the references for this. If I quickly, and my apologies, I shall just go here, and I will load my data insights and bring up here. If I come here and click on blog, if you have to remember zomlex.co.uk/blog, and there is a link there to all the R code and to all the Power BI desktops, as well as a link to a quick plug, a link there to the meetup that I talked about, the meetup in London that I talked about. Great. Yes, my credit card is expiring soon. Let's not find about that. Okay, so what I wanted to do then is if I click back to, actually, yeah, sorry, I wasn't showing you, thanks. So yes, I was just showing you, let me just go back to this, and yeah. So there's the blog, and if I go down, it's got a link to the GitHub page with all the R code. So there we go. And as well as that, there's been a couple of other talks. They've actually already happened, so you're just going to have to wait till the talks come out. Layla over there gave an excellent talk this morning about R and showing market basket analysis. And Christian and Justina have just talked about R visuals and lots of other topic modeling in the session before this. So I am, yes, June 27th. And don't forget to fill in your submissions. And with that, with 14 seconds to go, I will say Thank you. And oh, we still have 5 seconds. So if there are any questions, please stand up there. If you want to go to the microphone and then shout it out, and then everybody can hear it.
In your word count example,
Yeah.
I'm curious how you would handle something like business intelligence, and you want to treat that as a single unit.
Yes, and so far all I did was unigram analysis, and I didn't do anything. But I could have gone further, and I could have done analysis on bigrams or whole sentences, and that's possible within the tidytext package that I showed. It also was the topic of the topic modeling in the previous session, and they were doing a lot of that. And that would be very useful to do. You saw plastic bags there. The other thing is that I also did this with cognitive services. I called some cognitive services from R, and cognitive services, their text analytics, key phrases package, actually picks up all those wonderful phrases. So you saw things like tax analysis and human rights and things like that, obviously words that went together. So cognitive services text analysis is the fastest way to do that. Thanks. Okay. What visual did I use for the bubble chart? That was a standard Power BI visual. Yes, it's a standard visual. It has a play button. Absolutely. It's a motion chart with a play button. Great. Okay, thank you very much.